Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the second of 5 webinars in our Looker Toolkit series. My name is Mare Newton, and I'm the Customer Education Manager at Looker. And today, my awesome team member, Jill Hardy, will be talking about the principles behind building impactful dashboards. You should see 2 different windows available within the webinar platform. One will show the slides that are being presented, and the other one will be called the media player, and that's going to show Jill's demonstration later on in this webinar. There's also a Q&A panel within the platform that you can feel free to use throughout the webinar to send any questions that you have. We'll try to address a few of those live at the end of the session, and I'll also try to answer a few as we go just through the Q&A panel. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so we will share that recording with you after the webinar is over. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jill to dive into the content.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. Today, we're going to look at creating dashboards from conception to finish. So we're going to cover everything from what to consider before you begin building a dashboard. We're going to provide guidance and resources around visualization and dig into best practices to guide you when you're actually putting a dashboard together. And for the end, we're going to conclude with a dashboard workshop. So I'm going to show you a live dashboard that's similar to some we've seen in the wild and ask for your suggestions to improve it based on everything we learned in this hour. So just to introduce myself, I'm Jill. I'm a technical training content developer here at Looker, or I sometimes like to call myself a Looker explainer. So you can see my work up at training.looker.com. We've got some great self-paced e-learning courses, which I highly encourage you to check out. There's even one about building dashboards in there, which was the inspiration for this session. So definitely check that out. Speaking of the session, again, so glad you're here today. I'm really excited to share some insights that you can start incorporating into your dashboards right away. Just as excited as a native Californian watching actual snowflakes fall from the sky, which is what you're seeing in this picture of me. I was in Maine last winter. So anyway, that's enough about me. I'd love to know a bit about you guys as well. So I'm going to put up a poll here. How would you describe yourself? So you can pick more than one of these options. Would you say you primarily consume data from dashboards? Have you ever created a dashboard before? Might you say your primary role involves creating a dashboard, that people depend on you for that? Would you even call yourself a dashboard expert? So let me know who's here. I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to vote, and we'll see the results on the next slide. Okay, pretty fair mix here. That's great. Even a couple experts in the audience, so excited to have you guys here. Okay, so on to the main show. So what we're going to be talking about today, there are these 3 principles I really want to drill in on, and this is going to come back in a major way later in the presentation. But in brief, when you're building a dashboard, think about clarity. That means that the viewers of the dashboard aren't left guessing about what the content in the dashboard means. The content is really self-evident. Just like a nutrition label makes it clear what's inside of the food that you purchase that you're going to eat. Simplicity means a dashboard includes only the information necessary to tell the data story it was made to tell. So making it really crisp and meaningful. And finally, flow is a really fun one we're actually going to play with later. And that means the content is arranged in a really steady, sensical, it's a well-organized stream of information that will lead the viewers through naturally. So let's talk about the first step in building an impactful dashboard, which is understanding your audience. So what's the big idea here? Well, the idea is that every dashboard needs a big idea. So this is a central theme that you can refer to as you create your content. In other words, what is the point of your dashboard? Having a clear goal will help you attain the goal, right, of creating a dashboard that is clear and simple. So the answer to what's this all about is really going to depend on your audience, who they are, what they're trying to accomplish. So for example, an executive who's making strategic business decisions needs different information than an operations manager who needs to keep things running smoothly on a day-to-day basis. So in order to refine the big idea behind your dashboard, you're going to want to actually talk to your audience and ask them what they're hoping to get out of it. So another poll for you guys. Do you have a process in place to gather requirements from your audience today when you're building a dashboard? Yes or no? Okay, that's a solid no. Don't feel bad about that. So we ran this session live at our joint conference in San Francisco this year, and in a room of about 55 people, I would say only 2 or 3 had something like this in place today. And so I'm going to give you some guidelines you can use to help set a process like this up. So in brief, you're going to want to know who your audience is. You're going to want to know what do they want to get out of the dashboard, and you're going to want to know what actions they're going to take based on the data. So I clearly have a favorite bullet point here. It's because this last part is so crucial. So when people take action on the information they find, that means they're making data-driven decisions. It means the dashboard is serving them well, and they're going to continue to rely on it. It's having an impact on them and the way that they do their job. That's what we're here for. So if you'd like any more guidance about understanding your audience and questions to ask, you can download this dashboard requirements gathering worksheet. It's linked here in the resources section of the webinar interface. And this document's going to guide you through some more detailed questions you can ask your audience to refine your big idea. And so I know it's one thing for me to say, go ahead and go understand your audience. Just figure out what they want. And it's another thing to actually go and have those conversations. So with Mayor's help, I'm going to give you guys an example of how a conversation like this might go. So in this case, I'm going to be the analyst who's building a dashboard. She's going to be the audience or business user. And so I might approach her just saying something like, oh, hey, Mayor, so can you tell me really what's your role here at Housing, Inc.?
Hi, Jill. I am a housing development manager, so I oversee the development process from conception to ribbon cutting.
Okay, thank you. So I understand you want some information about the housing markets in California, but what specifically are you hoping to get out of this dashboard?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. I want something that will help me really focus in on where we should be pursuing our next development.
Okay, that's good to know. So what kind of information helps you do that? How do you narrow in?
Well, I need to see trends in the marketplace. So what are the local rents like for different unit sizes? How much is property selling for? What's the median income for the area? Are there affordable housing requirements in the local area? How long is the typical permitting process? It would be great if we could set all of this up, and then I could just change my location and that I'm looking at really depending on my interest.
Okay, thanks for the information. So imagine you had this information in front of you, then what would you do with it? Like, what is the action that you want to take?
Well, if I saw something that looked promising, I'd pick up the phone and start making calls to people in the area so that we could get our process rolling.
Okay, so if you had access to all of this information from the different areas, would that really be enough to pick up that phone? Like, is there anything else you might need to know?
You know, Another thing that can actually have a surprisingly large influence on the decision to build is parking. If there's ample parking in the area, that means that we don't have to build as much parking out ourselves, and we save a ton of money. So I'd love to be able to see what parking is like in each area as well.
Okay, good to know. I'll make sure we get you that parking information too. Thank you so much for the chat. Okay, end scene. So obviously that was scripted, but I hope it gives you an example of kind of the structure of those conversations and how you can really start generally and just keep asking questions and narrow in until you figure out what they're trying to do. So in this case, Mara wants all the information she'll need to actually pick up the phone and start calling to get the development process rolling. So as then the person making the dashboard, I know that any information that does not help her do that can just get right out of there. And everything in the dashboard should be serving that greater purpose of helping her make that decision. Okay, so now we've talked to our audience, we've narrowed in on what this dashboard means. So let's get into visualizations. And I'm just going to take a step back and let's think about for a second why we need visualizations at all. So take this table as an example, average household income in California. In order to process this visualization, we have to scan each line. So in cases when you need exact values, like maybe you want to check on a customer's purchase history, tables like this are fantastic. In cases when you're looking for trends, they are actually very difficult. So contrast this with this visualization. It's the exact same data, but it's just presented as a map. So this makes it a lot easier to see the concentration of wealth, the proximity of different counties to each other, and so on from a first glance. And this is because your brain can process visual information a lot faster than it can process the table that we saw on the previous slide where you're reading line by line by line. So, I mean, if you ever wanted to convince someone that the wealth in California is kind of highly concentrated in the San Francisco Bay Area, you know, this is a good way to do it. That table, maybe not so much. So next, how do we reliably pick visualizations that say what we want to say? So why does it even matter if we choose the right visualizations? I'm going to go into another example. Okay, everybody's favorite, the pie chart. So if you're just looking at this quickly, it's actually kind of misleading. So it might appear at first that LA County accounts for roughly 35% of all the housing units in California. But if you look again, if you read the title, you'll see that this chart only shows the top 10 counties. So LA only makes up 35% of the top 10 counties. We don't actually know what percentage it makes up of the overall units in the state. And check out the same information, again, presented in the bar chart. It's a lot less likely to mislead because we're not talking in terms of percentages anymore, but in raw numbers. And even though I accidentally cropped out the title when I took this screenshot, you still know what's going on. So the right visualization can be super powerful. How do you harness that power for yourself? Well, we can help with that. So it's important to understand what you're trying to show. That's going to influence your chart choice. So broadly, I'm going to start from the top of this map here. So comparisons tend to focus on the similarities and differences in values across categories. Down to the right, we have distribution. They focus on the frequency that certain values occur. Composition on the bottom there. That'll focus on how the data is sliced and diced in different ways, what makes it up. And data relationships on the left. These tend to focus on how individual data points relate to each other to help identify clusters or correlations. So this chart map here is also available in the resources section of our interface. And even better, we've got an interactive version of it embedded within our Designing Great Dashboards e-learning. Again, that's up on training.looker.com. So in the interactive version, you'll be able to click on each of these charts and see an example of it in use. You'll see suggestions about when to use it and cautions about when you might not want to use a certain one. Okay, so at this point, you've interviewed your audience, you've chosen some stellar visualizations. Let's actually put this thing together. Again, referring back to our guiding principles, we're going to start with clarity. So to figure out if your dashboard is clear enough, ask yourself from a first glance, is it obvious what I'm looking at? You can help the answer to that question be yes if you use the descriptive titles, add in some labels, some notes to convey what users are actually looking at. So users should know what each number or visualization is saying just from looking at it. If your visualizations are needing a lot of explanation, either their purpose is unclear just from a look, or maybe they're too complicated. So if you find people coming to you with questions, probably your dashboard could be clarified, maybe revisiting the titles you chose, adding notes with text tiles to explain things can help. Always keep your intended user in mind. So remember that business users aren't going to know how to translate column names of your database into business definitions. You can do that for them. And also for the LookML developers in our audience, you can add description like the one shown in the black box here to help add these tooltips so people can poke around and figure things out on their own even more. Now on to simplicity. So your guiding light here is to include only what you need to include to tell the story you want to tell. So everything should have a purpose. Think back to your big idea. What is the action your audience wants to take after they see this information? And does every tile contribute to that idea? As an example, here we've got a dashboard for the manager of a sales team. So immediately at the top, we can see how we're doing against quota. Underneath, we can see how the team's doing on a person-by-person basis. That's all those little letters, they represent different people. You can also see how everyone's doing booking meetings. So if I logged in and I looked at this, I could pretty easily pinpoint who to recognize that might have strategies to share across the team. And I can find out who needs support just from looking at this. Another way to increase the simplicity of your dashboard is to hide any theories that might not be necessary, stick to a simple color scheme, and you can highlight what's important using color. Actually, so again, in this example, my eye is immediately drawn to that top left total 1 ACV. That jumps out to me because it's displayed in purple and everything else is just kind of muted blue and green. So you can see how color can be just a really powerful way to highlight what's important. Another thing you can do is remove any text that is not needed. So notice on these two column charts, they don't have a y-axis label, and that's because it's obvious what the numbers mean already. One of them is dollar amounts, another is percentages. So you don't need a label to repeat that information for you. That would just clutter it up a little bit. And again, for our LookML developers, consider using drills and linking to provide more details if needed. So the details that might fall outside of that particular idea or that main audience. Just for somebody who really wants to drill in, you could give them that capability without crowding the whole dashboard. So revealing details as needed with drill paths and linking. And here's an example of what a drill looks like. So as you can see here, it goes into a lot of detail about the performance of a particular sales rep. And this amount of information would be inappropriate for the main dashboard. It would really crowd things if we had this available about every single sales rep. It would get out of hand pretty fast. But occasionally I might want to look at this, so it's nice to have it available. Okay, so now we're on to flow. With flow, you're helping to guide the user's eyes to the points that they should focus on first. So generally, you want to go from a high level to more detail as you go down. So think of it like a newspaper. You want the big news, the headlines at the top, and if people get intrigued by that, they can go below the fold for more details. Similarly, in a dashboard, people can scroll down if they want to find out more, because the important stuff is at the top. So for people who read English, right, we have a natural way that our eyes want to look at text. It starts on the top left, it goes over to the right, then down and left, over to the right. So you can arrange your dashboard in a way that the important information is the first place their eyes land on the top left. If you've got viewers from who read in other languages that have a different reading pattern, again, follow that reading pattern of the audience you're building for. Really cater to their natural inclinations. That's how they're going to get the best use out of the dashboard. Another way to improve the flow of your dashboard is to use margins and titles to frame the visualization. So you can see we've done that in this example. And with these titles and margins, you can break up your dashboard story into sections. So we've got two sections here, campaign performance, and there's just at the bottom, you can see profit analysis. That's our other section, right? It doesn't need to be visible at the top, but it's nice to know it's there. Speaking of this view, it's also a great idea to keep everything in a section just to one page if you can. And again, as people scroll, they can find out more details. Also from a beautification perspective, really consider the alignment of the lines of your tiles. So here you can see everything lines up pretty neatly. It would be easy to not do that, but just know that it'll give you an extra little boost when things are nice and neat like this. So here's that profit analysis section. Again, scrolling down, getting into more details. Okay. So that covers our main principles there: clarity, simplicity, and flow. And it's time for our interactive portion, which is our dashboard workshop. So just to introduce this, the data we're going to be looking at comes from the American Community Survey and the census. So we're looking at population and housing information. And let's just propose that our big idea here is going to be more like an educational survey of the housing market in California. So maybe the target audience here is an economics professor, and this professor wants to send his or her students to the dashboard in order to study the effects of the 2008 financial crisis on home ownership rates. So that's our big idea. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can look at the dashboard. Again, go to that media player section of your interface. And this should be popping up right about now. So here's what we're working with. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and up to the top one time. Oops, there we go. Okay, so we've got a lot of different metrics going on here. Income, housing size, types of living quarters, home ownership rates. And again, our big idea, we want people to understand, to help them study the effects of the 2008 financial crisis on home ownership rates. So if you go back into our slide view, I'm going to put up another poll. How would you improve this dashboard? So please just vote for your top 3 choices. We could add section headers to break up the content. We could add margins, add explanatory notes using text tiles, change the titles to clarify what the tiles are showing, change the colors in each tile to unify the color scheme, change the sizes of some tiles to better match their content, move important tiles to the top, and delete tiles that don't contribute to the big idea. So out of all of these, which 3 do you think are the most important? Okay, I'm going to peek at the results. Okay, so over half of you are saying we need to add section headers to break up the content. So that's, yeah, I totally agree. Goes back to that clarity concept, simplicity, flow, all of that is helped by section headers. So let's go ahead and just add some section headers in right now. And so if you flip back to your media player, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. I've got my dashboard here. I'm going to edit it. Oops. That's actually not what I want. Okay, so I want this text. Okay. I'm going to make this header shaped. And let's move it up. All right, I'm going to bring this one more. Again, we want each section to take up about a page of room. So as we get started with section headers, given the size of the tiles, this is probably about what I would do. And we could add more as we go along. Let's see. Next, so we've got a dead tie between change the titles to clarify what the tiles are showing and change the colors in each tile to unify the color scheme. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the colors. We just want to click edit on the tile, and you can find the color scheme in this gear menu. Never be afraid of the gear menu. It's there for you to play with. You won't break anything with it. And let's change this just to this Looker Classic color scheme. I like that one. oops, this one has its colors preset because it's a heat map. Okay, but you can see just with this section and changing a couple of tiles, I don't need to do the whole dashboard right now because there's a lot here, but you can already see how this is starting to look nice and neat already. So in cases where the titles were really unclear, that is such an important point. I'm glad you guys voted for that one. Go ahead and change those. In this case, I thought the tiles were decently named already, so I'm not going to jump into that. But if you wanted to, you would just edit your tile. And you could change the title right up in this section. Oh, I see. I did not scroll down to view all the results. Sorry, guys. So we have 77% of you voted for move important tiles to the top. I love it. Yes, that is so important. And 75% said delete the tiles that don't contribute to the big idea. Yes, you guys are rocking it. Those are. Go ahead and delete a couple tiles here. So I'm interested in how the 2008 financial crisis impacted home ownership rates. So we've got renters versus owners here, but there's no time associated with it. So this is current information. We don't really need it. So I'm just going to delete it. Growth in home ownership rate over the years. Yeah, that looks perfect. I'm even going to make this big so that we can look at it. Percent vacant housing by county. This probably doesn't really add much to the point of the dashboard, so I'm going to delete it. Okay, we've got a percentage of household owners. Going to get rid of that. Average income per household. We saw that earlier. It was great to look at then, but again, doesn't really contribute to this big idea that we're having. So I'm going to get rid of it. Here we've got growth in home ownership and renter rates over the years. I like that. I think that deserves a spotlight. And I'm just going to adjust these. So these are front and center. These are really saying what I want them to say. And I might even change this title to something like growth in home ownership rates over the years. So we've got one breaking this out by gender, one showing renting versus ownership. So you can see in 2008, the rental rate just skyrocketed and the ownership rate actually dropped. So that's super informative. Again, anything that's showing information over the years, so where we can actually see what happened in 2008, is going to make it in, because that's saying something interesting in relation to our big idea. Type of living quarters, going to get rid of it. So you can see I'm being pretty merciless in deleting things, and that's because there's just too much information here to begin with, so it was a bit crowded. Get rid of that. Okay. Okay, and so you can imagine if we were to really flesh this out, I might have a different section. I would change all of these colors. and then our dashboard would end up looking nice and neat. It might look something like this. So here's an example where we actually have this text tile explaining something at the top here about the 2008 crash. You can see we've got margins, things are looking nice and neat, the same color scheme. And if somebody really wants some more information down here, they can just scroll below the fold and they'll understand what's going on just because we've got these nice titles here. Okay. Thank you guys for participating with me here. I'm going to flip back to our slides now. So if you want, you can minimize your media player, your media viewer. And again, our key takeaways here: clarity. Use titles, labels, and notes to convey what users are looking at. Simplicity. Include only what you need to tell the story. And to guide you here, think of your big idea. Think of what your audience wants to get out of this. Flow. Help guide users' eyes to the points that they should focus on. So if you take anything home with you today, I hope it's these three ideas and how they can work together in harmony to make a really great dashboard. So that's the end of my presentation here today. Now I'll open it up for questions.
Hey, Jill, I've seen a few questions come through that I wanted to pass along to you. The first one was actually about any considerations when designing dashboards for mobile devices or tablets. It sounds like a few people may have some mobile people accessing their dashboards.
Yeah, that's a great one. So when you're designing for mobile, using larger images is important. But what's really going to help you the most is if you can actually see the mobile view as you go along, which you can do if you go into your browser and you go to that inspect property. So if you guys will flip back to the media player, I'll show you how it's done. So you're here on your dashboard. I'm on a Mac, so that's a double click for me. Going down to inspect. The inspector pops up. And then here's the button you want. It shows mobile devices. When you first get in, you might not see this, but if you just click this, it's going to open up this mobile view. So you can see my neat dashboard may actually be a little squished if you look at it on a mobile device. So if I were designing for a mobile audience, I would probably go make some tweaks and then come back to the inspector, open this up, and so on until I design it just the way I like. So again, it's that double click, or clicking with two fingers rather, open the inspector, and then open the mobile view here.
Great. So there's a couple other questions that have come through. Here's one. So how would you recommend deciding when to use one dashboard versus separating out into multiple dashboards within a space? So depending on your requirement, there might be a lot of tiles. When is that kind of break-off point?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there are really two aspects of the answer here. So one is when you're thinking about the human brain, studies have shown we can hold about 9 things at once in our working memory. After that, things start to get a little lost or fuzzy. You might forget what that title up there said. So I would try to keep a dashboard to about 9 tiles. And then if you need more detailed information, again, display that through linking or drills. Now, if you absolutely need to include more than that, I would say 20 tiles should be your strict cutoff just from a performance perspective, because when you've got a lot going on in a dashboard, it's going to take longer to load. And we want them to be, quick. We want people to get their answers right away. So if you can keep it to...
Another question that came up that I think will be a good one to answer for the whole group. What do you do if the person who you're building the dashboard for continues to ask for more data and more things on it, to the extent that it actually impairs the clarity that you're striving to achieve? And then as a follow-up, if you have any tips for what to do if that person maybe is a little bit more senior, and how to handle those sorts of situations.
Yeah, that's a great question. Scope creep is something I think a lot of us fear. So when you're having a conversation with this person, when you're having that first requirements gathering conversation, really drill into what is the point of this dashboard. What are they looking to do with the data, and what's the action that they want to take? And just really kind of set expectations with them and say, okay, so I'm going to make you a dashboard that's going to help you do this. And this is what this dashboard is for. And so just really establish the point of it, and get their buy-in on that as much as you can. And if they really need that extra information, again, I would say you could make them a separate dashboard with all the little details that they need, or just, link to it outside. Because in the end, you do really want, even if they think that they want a ton of information, it might not actually help them do their job better. But something that's crisp and really guides them is going to help them. So stick to your guns as much as you can when establishing what the dashboard is about, why they want you to build it, and then make sure that you just keep reinforcing that as you go along.
Fantastic. So another one that has come through related to scheduling, actually. So sometimes dashboards might get scheduled out to various other folks in the company. Are there any special considerations for, similar to mobile, dashboards that are going to be sent out via schedule kind of as a PDF instead of viewed live inside of Looker?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing to think about when sending dashboards out as PDFs is that in a static image, you're not going to have those awesome tooltips that you get and you can hover over in a live dashboard. So be really conscious of adding labels to your data points. Make sure you have really descriptive titles. Try to make it even more self-evident, and make sure that everything that somebody will need to know is visible right away without having to click or hover.
Fabulous. So here's actually a question that's come up, and I've answered it for a few folks through the Q&A panel. But inside of Looker, for those single tiles that have maybe a comparison value at the bottom, would you be able to show how to turn on that comparison value in those visualization settings? I think there's a lot of folks on the line who would be interested in seeing where that is.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a look. I think I might have one of those. No, I don't.
I think you've had a couple. Oh, if there's one on this dashboard. I know there's been several that have popped up in the dashboards on the slides that have gotten a number of people excited, wondering how to do that.
Yeah, they have. If you can give me a moment, I'll look for some of those examples, and then can come back and show you.
Okay, great. And maybe while you're I guess you're looking, so this might be challenging, but I had a couple people asking about margins. You mentioned margins in that poll that had come up, and you're showing margins in sort of the live dashboard that you have up now. How do you achieve that, and how do you kind of decide where to put your margins and what sizing to use?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here, I can show you really quick on our previous dashboard. I'm going to share my screen one more time. So this, the margins depend on the size of the tile and where it's placed. So say I make this one a little smaller, and then I move it in. I make this one a little smaller. And there you have it. We've got just a really nice frame here. So you can line everything up to look nice and neat. And it's really just a matter of clicking and dragging things around. And as far as how you decide how big these should be, it's kind of up to visually what looks good. I think that, you know, this size is pretty nice. You can obviously play around as much as you like, but this is just like one tick in from the edge. Just gives it that really crisp, professional kind of feeling.
Great. And then were you going to look for the single value example to show the comparison? Because I've seen some additional questions come through of some folks who are excited to see that.
Yes, yeah, I'm gonna do a little dive through some dashboards here and try and find one. Yeah, meanwhile, if there are any other, maybe there's something that's come up in the chat pretty commonly you've answered that maybe could be nice to read out. That might be a good way to handle that.
Yes, well, there's a few that I can answer while you're looking for that, so we can double team this here. I had one question come through. This should be a simple one. Is the inspection view that that you had showed for showing the mobile device look and kind of width and height and everything, is that available in development mode or by admins, or can anyone view it? That's actually something anyone should be able to view. It's in your browser. It's not part of Looker. So if you're just in your browser and do like a right click or that double click, you should see inspect down at the bottom, and then that's almost like a developer console for the web as opposed to something that's in Looker. So that's one that had come up. And then I saw another one asking about this American Community Survey data and whether this is available as a Looker block. And actually it is. We have some data blocks within Looker, and the American Community Survey is available as a data block. So that should be on our looker.com/platform/blocks, and you should be able to find a section for data blocks, and the American Community Survey should be there. And then finally, let's see, I see a question here. What is the difference between a link and a drill? That's a very good question. So a link and a drill, they actually can function similarly. A drill typically is going to be kind of a set of fields where you might be able to click and see detailed data. So maybe you're clicking into a value that you see on the dashboard, and that drill modal pops up and it gives you a more detailed view of some of the line items that maybe make up that data point. So that's typically what we refer to when we talk about drills. When we talk about linking, that's often going to be maybe linking from a high-level dashboard over to a more detailed dashboard. And it's usually, because in Looker everything is URL based, whenever you're starting from that high level dashboard, you might have a link that actually just directs you over to a different URL to that more detailed dashboard. Now, where it gets really interesting is that with some fancy HTML on the back end, you can actually have that link pass values into the URL so that the dashboard you move to actually links to a specific value. So if I were to click on a particular state, I could link over to a dashboard that actually drills in and shows data just for that state with the filter already applied. So it's a little bit of a drill. That's where these things get a little bit muddy, but that would really be a link with a filter applied through the link, and a drill is more so clicking into an actual value and then seeing more detailed information of how that value gets made up. Let's see. We have a few other questions, and Jill, just holler when you have a single tile that you're ready to show.
Okay, I'm hollering.
Oh, you're hollering. Perfect. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so you should be seeing a single value visualization here. This is showing the percentage of homeowners in California here. So you can go into the gear menu here and click on comparison and show comparison. So important note, this number is coming here from our leftmost column. In order to give it something to compare to, you're going to want to also include, like in this case, the percentage of renters. So make sure that there's something in the data for it to compare against. And once you have that, it's as simple as flipping this button. And that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Jill. I think that's about all the time we have for questions today. I did see there are several other questions that have popped up, so we will follow up with as many of you as we can after the webinar. So we'll get a report of all of these and reach out individually with any questions that haven't been answered. So don't worry, we'll still make sure we get to your questions. And in the meantime, there will be a recording sent out. It will take a few days, so just a heads up on that, but it will be sent out via email to all of you. And then we have 3 additional webinars included in this series. Our next one coming up is actually tomorrow, covering custom visualizations in Looker. It will be geared a little bit more towards admins and be focusing on how to create and install custom visualizations using JavaScript and V3. And then we'll also be taking some of these sessions with us on our Join the Tour, where we'll have a bit more time to do some hands-on components. So be on the lookout for any tour stops in cities near you. We hope to see you there. Thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of the day.